My mother and her boyfriend had always loved the idea of a spontaneous adventure, so one morning, they decided to take an unplanned road trip to a secluded beach they had heard about. The kind of place that wasn't on the map, a hidden gem far from the beaten path. The drive started out as any other, crisp morning air, a light breeze, and the excitement of the unknown ahead. But as they ventured further from the familiar roads, the scenery around them began to change. The trees grew denser, casting long shadows over the narrow, winding road. The sun, once a reassuring presence, seemed to struggle to penetrate the thick canopy above, leaving them in a twilight of sorts, even though it was still morning. The towns became fewer and far between, the houses more sparse and decrepit, as if the very world around them had been forgotten. The road twisted and turned, leading them deeper into isolation, and with every mile, the feeling of being completely cut off from civilization grew stronger. The excitement of the trip started to wane, replaced by a growing sense of unease. As we drove along the winding, unfamiliar roads, the sense of isolation grew with each passing mile. The sky was still dark, with only the faintest hint of dawn on the horizon. The trees seemed to close in around us, their branches forming twisted, shadowy shapes against the dim light. The excitement of our spontaneous trip to the secluded beach began to fade, replaced by a creeping unease. After what felt like hours of driving with no clear direction, we finally spotted a dimly lit building up ahead, a hotel, old and worn, barely visible through the fog that had started to roll in. Relieved to find some sign of life, we decided to stop and ask for directions. As we pulled into the empty parking lot, the building loomed over us, its windows dark and unwelcoming. The air was heavy with silence as we stepped out of the car. The only sound was the soft crunch of gravel beneath our feet. The hotel's entrance was dimly lit by a flickering bulb, casting long, distorted shadows across the cracked pavement. We hesitated for a moment before pushing open the creaking door and stepping inside. The lobby was eerily quiet, the air thick with dust and the scent of old wood. As we approached the reception desk, the stillness was almost suffocating. The dim lighting barely illuminated the space, revealing faded wallpaper and furniture that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged, a man in an outdated suit, standing behind the desk with an unsettlingly polite smile. His presence was unnerving, his eyes cold and distant. He spoke softly, his voice echoing slightly in the empty room, as he gave us directions to the beach. There was something off about him, something that made my skin crawl, but we were desperate to reach our destination. So, with a quick thank you, we left the hotel, eager to be back on the road. As we drove away, the unease lingered, the image of that strange receptionist burned into my mind. The hotel, with its eerie quiet and that unsettling man, left us with a sense of dread that we couldn't shake. But we had directions now, and the beach was waiting, though neither of us could shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. After what felt like an eternity, the narrow road finally opened up to reveal the beach ahead. The first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon, casting a soft, golden glow on the sand and the calm waves. It should have felt like a reward after the long, tense drive, but something about the place felt off. The beach was serene, almost too perfect in its isolation. Not a single person in sight. Just us, the sea, and the endless stretch of sand. The only sound was the gentle lapping of the waves, but even that seemed muted, like the world was holding its breath. We were both starving by then, the excitement of the trip long gone, replaced by a gnawing hunger and a lingering sense of unease. We decided to wait for a bakery to open, hoping that a warm meal would help shake off the strange encounter at the hotel. But as we sat in the car, watching the pale light spread across the deserted beach, the eerie feeling only grew stronger. As we waited, we talked about the hotel. My boyfriend mentioned how strange it was that we hadn't seen anyone else there, not even a passing car on the road leading to it. I couldn't shake the memory of the receptionist, how unsettling his presence had been, how the air in the lobby felt thick and heavy, as if the walls were closing in on us. We tried to laugh it off, convincing ourselves that we were just tired, that the long drive was playing tricks on our minds. But deep down, neither of us believed it. The beach, though beautiful in its isolation, felt too empty, too still. There was no joy in finally arriving. Instead, it felt like we had escaped one strange place only to end up in another. Every now and then, I'd catch myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone, or something, standing there, watching us. But there was nothing, just the endless stretch of sand and sea, and the growing sense that we weren't alone. We were no longer just two people on a spontaneous road trip. It felt like something else had joined us, something unseen, lingering just out of sight. As soon as the bakery doors opened, we practically rushed inside, eager for something normal to take our minds off the strange events of the morning. The smell of fresh bread and pastries should have been comforting, but the unease from earlier still clung to us like a cold mist. We ordered some coffee and pastries, hoping that the warmth of the food would shake the chill that had settled deep in our bones. As we sat down to eat, the baker, a man in his late 50s with kind eyes and a warm smile, made small talk with us. It was a relief to finally interact with someone who seemed completely ordinary. We told him about our drive, how we had gotten lost on the way, and how we'd ended up stopping at an old hotel to ask for directions. I watched as his smile slowly faded, replaced by a furrowed brow and a look of concern. He set down the tray he was holding and leaned closer, his voice dropping to a serious tone. "Which hotel did you stop at?" he asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. My boyfriend described it, the location, the worn-down exterior, the dim lighting inside. The baker's expression grew even more serious, and he shook his head slowly. "That hotel, it's been abandoned for years," he said, his voice low and steady. "No one's worked there since the previous owner passed away. They say it's haunted." A cold shiver ran down my spine, and I could see the color drain from my boyfriend's face. We exchanged a glance, both of us realizing at the same moment that what we had experienced wasn't normal. The polite, unsettling receptionist, the eerie atmosphere, it all made sense now, in the worst possible way. The baker continued, his voice grim. "Locals avoid that place. There have been stories, people claiming they've seen things there. Shadows that move on their own, voices that come from empty rooms. But no one's dared to go inside for years. Not since it was shut down." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, my stomach churning at the thought of what we had encountered. We had walked right into a place that should have been empty, yet it wasn't. We had spoken to someone, or something, that didn't belong in this world. The realization hit us like a ton of bricks, leaving us both shaken to our core. The bakery, once a place of comfort and warmth, now felt like a fragile barrier between us and whatever had been in that hotel. We finished our food in silence, the gravity of what we had just learned hanging heavy in the air. The world suddenly felt a lot darker, a lot more mysterious, and far less safe than it had just hours before. The ride back home was filled with a heavy silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us from that place, something unseen and unsettling. Every creak of the car, every rustle of leaves outside, sent a jolt of fear through me. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a shadowy figure sitting in the back seat, watching us with cold, empty eyes. In the days that followed, the memory of the hotel haunted me. I would replay the encounter over and over in my mind, trying to make sense of what had happened. The receptionist's face would come back to me in vivid detail, his unsettlingly polite smile, the way his eyes seemed to follow us even after we turned to leave. I wondered if we had stumbled into something far beyond our understanding, something that defied the boundaries of reality. My boyfriend tried to laugh it off, saying it was probably just our imaginations running wild, but I could see the unease in his eyes too. He didn't want to admit it, but deep down, we both knew that what we experienced was no mere figment of imagination. There was something about that place, something dark and unknowable, that had left its mark on us. As time passed, I found myself questioning everything: how close we had come to something otherworldly, how easily we had walked into a situation that could have ended so differently. I would lie awake at night, my mind racing with thoughts of that abandoned hotel, wondering what had really happened there and who, or what, the receptionist truly was. The thought that we had spoken to something not of this world chilled me to my core. The experience left a scar, a lingering sense of unease that never truly went away. I began to see the world differently, no longer sure of what was real and what wasn't, constantly questioning the shadows that moved in the corners of my vision. Even now, when I pass by an old building or see a deserted road, that memory comes rushing back, a reminder that the world is far stranger and more mysterious than we like to believe. The encounter with that receptionist wasn't just a strange event, it was a brush with something beyond our understanding, something that still sends shivers down my spine whenever I think about it. And I can't help but wonder, what would have happened if we had stayed just a little bit longer?